Hello, friends. The 1,078 days of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Russians are advancing on the western bank of the Oskil River in the Kharkiv region. A few days ago, the Ukrainian military telegram channel Deep State reported that the Russians had recaptured Novomlinsk, which was cleared by the Ukrainian armed forces in early December. According to the telegram channel, the command attached little importance to this settlement, and a few weeks ago the Russians were able to retake it, and now they are saturating it with manpower and weapons. The further, the more difficult it will be to eliminate this bridgehead. At the same time, the situation around Dvorachna is not getting any better, the telegram channel reported. After the latest update, the Deep State map records the enemy's advance south of the village of Zapadny and towards the road leading north from Kupiansk. After which there are about 5 kilometers left from the front line to the north of Kupiansk on the western bank of the Oskil. That is, it is possible that Russian troops thus want to advance on the western part of the city, which was previously stormed only from the east. The Russians also captured another fourth bridgehead on the western bank of the Oskil, having advanced in the area of the village of Tupali, which is right on the border. According to Deep State, the enemy has repeatedly attempted to cross the water obstacle in this area, and they began around mid-January, while probing of the area began at the beginning of last month. According to preliminary information, the Russians managed to achieve success in the village of Tupali, but the Defense Forces units pushed the enemy back. After some time, the enemy made a second attempt, but in a different place, and managed to take positions on the mountain south of the village, having forced the river. The Russians also tried to form a bridgehead between Kamyanka and Topoli, but to no avail. There, they failed to consolidate and build on their success, so this remains only a warning bell for future attempts that the enemy may make, writes Deep State. Ukrainian military expert Mashevitz also writes that the situation north of Kupiansk continues to deteriorate. According to him, the enemy's advanced units have apparently managed to push Ukrainian troops out of the village of Zapadny and expand their bridgehead to the south, along the Oskil. Enemy units are persistently attacking along the Dvorachna-Kupiansk road and are trying to break through towards Kindrashivka and Orashivka. I would like to emphasize once again that if this enemy bridgehead is not given due attention in the near future, the defense of Kupiansk will be complicated to the limit. Moreover, the situation in the entire eastern part of the Kharkiv region may change radically, and not in Ukraine's favor, in just a few weeks, Mashevitz wrote. In general, further advancement of the Russians to the west of Oskil will create a number of threats for the Ukrainian armed forces. Firstly, the threat of a strike to the south into the rear of the Ukrainian troops in Kupiansk. Secondly, to the west towards Chugwiv and Kharkiv, cutting off the communications of the Ukrainian army units fighting for Vovchansk. True, the distance to Chugwiv from Oskil is not close, more than 50 kilometers, and for such a breakthrough, the Russians will need to transfer large forces to the western bank and at the same time expand the bridgehead to protect themselves from attacks from the flanks. Today, Ukrainian resources wrote that the intensity of Russian attacks is decreasing. Based on data from the General Staff of Ukraine, Deep State writes that there were 80 attacks by Russians yesterday, and at the peak in December, there were 292. The situation is as follows by month. In November, there were 5,205 attacks and an average daily number of assaults of about 173. In December, there were 6,247 attacks and an average daily number of assaults of 201. In January, there were 5,087 attacks and an average daily number of assaults of 164. Over 4 days in February, there were 381 attacks and an average daily number of assaults of about 95. Earlier, the Telegram channel also noted that, in January, Russia captured less territory than in the last months of last year. I note that this data does not correlate with the figures for the number of assaults. For example, in January, there were almost as many as in November, although Russia took much more territory in the last month of autumn. Therefore, how objective the General Staff data on the number of Russian attacks is an open question. In addition, it is too early to draw conclusions about the trend based on 4 days of February. If we compare data from Ukrainian and Russian Telegram channels, we can conclude that the command of the Ukrainian armed forces has been massively introducing reserves into the battle since the second half of January to stop Russia's advance in the Pokrovsk and Kurakovy directions, as well as in the Kursk region. Perhaps this is what is connected with the slowdown in the Russian advance in January. But the main question here is whether the Ukrainian troops have enough reserves to continue holding back the Russians, and whether the Russian troops have enough reserves to continue the offensive. Let me remind you that the publication Ukrainian Truth, citing a source in the General Staff, reported that, on January 11, Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi signed an order to transfer approximately 50,000 servicemen of all branches and types of troops to the infantry to begin rotations in combat brigades. We need to do this to launch the rotation mechanism. The resource that is currently studying in training centers is only enough for the minimum replenishment of units, and not for full provision of the combat component. And thanks to these movements between troops, as well as recruiting, we will be able to do this. There is already an approved rotation plan, the source said. Earlier, the New York Times wrote that there are 250,000 Ukrainian soldiers on the front in Ukraine and 400,000 Russian soldiers. That is, they want to transfer an additional 20% to the infantry. Friends, I understand that the duration of events is becoming less relevant for you, but for me, the situation is only getting worse. Those who have been with me for a long time know that preparing reports on this channel has become my main job, and I have no other job for obvious reasons. Lately, the channel has had few views, so I ask for your help. If you have the opportunity to support me with a cup of coffee, I will be very grateful. Thank you very much for understanding, and see you in the next video.